Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. A major PSYOP is coming. I think it's very clear if you pay attention that the outcome of this fake election, this selection, is going to be contested. And we need to look at the stories in the news because remember, the news is not there to inform you. It is there to condition you. They're all reading off of the same exact script as I'm about to show you. And the reason they're reading off of this script is because they're conditioning your brain into accepting what's actually coming. Nobody thinks about the process of how these people, these news anchors actually all get the same script. Nobody thinks at all. They just turn on the box, they listen to what they're told, and all they're trying to really get you to do is look at the world through their eyes, through Big Brother's eyes, instead of your own eyes, because the television blurs reality. That's what it does. They tell you about polling. They tell you about stories that they manufacture, whether it's events that happen at schools or events that are happening overseas. This is all to warp your perception of what's going on. And there's obviously going to be a massive PSYOP that comes out of this fake election in 2024. Now, if you don't notice the pattern, let me show it to you. Here's the pattern that we're seeing develop. Neck and neck. Neck and neck, neck and neck. Trump and Harris are neck and neck in 3 battleground states. Trump and Harris are neck and neck. In a national survey, polls show Trump and Harris are neck and neck. You getting the point yet? That they're telling you that they're neck and neck, that every media outlet out there wants you to know that they're neck and neck. And if you didn't get the point, well, there's other terms that are being used like a dead heat. Dead heat polls, dead heat race. Presidential election is in a dead heat. 2 weeks out, Trump and Harris locked in a dead heat. And again, like I said, the news isn't there to inform you. It's there to condition you. It's there to manufacture your perception of reality.
Your living room is the factory. The product being manufactured is you.
And inside of those themes, we have to look at what they're trying to tell us. They are setting us up for a major psychological operation. And for those of you that don't know what a psychological operation means, it means that it's a war on your mind. It means that they're contriving the news to set you up for a big event. And that big event is going to be the contested outcome of this fake election. And I've put together talking points from the mainstream media, the national news, and local affiliate media, from everything from NBC to ABC to Bloomberg, you name it. They're talking about this election being too tight to figure out the outcome. In fact, they're telling you that as of today, it's tied. It could go one way or the other. And they're letting you know strategically, this isn't coincidental that they're all using the same talking points. This is how they program you. They're strategically letting you know about the margin of error. Because like any movie, this is the third and final act. We have the opening, we have the middle of a movie, then we have the climax. And this right here is the third and final act. We had Trump, who was leading in a landslide after, of course, the fake scripted assassination attempts on his life, pulling people deeper into the PSYOP. Then, of course, we had the debate between Trump after Biden backed out and they put Harris in. Everyone said, there's absolutely no chance. We thought Biden had no shot. Well, Harris has an even less of a chance. Then we had the debate. Trump said some questionable things on purpose about people eating cats. And then, of course, it went the other way. And this is, of course, according to polls. So if you haven't heard yet, polls are not real. Polls are to blur your perception of reality. They're make-believe. So, of course, the polls show that Trump was going to win in a landslide. And all the talking points from August on were about Trump winning in a landslide. Then, as it goes, because this is a seesaw, it went the other way, where Harris was going to win in a landslide. And somehow, as we moved closer and closer in October to the fake election, now we are in a dead heat. A neck-and-neck race. A tie. And, of course, there's always that margin of error.
Less than 6 weeks to go until Election Day. Polling from Bloomberg News and Morning Consult continues to show a tight race in every battleground state. In the latest survey, Vice President Kamala Harris holds leads within the margin of error.
Georgia, there's the latest Fox News survey of likely voters in Georgia. That has Harris ahead of Trump by 3 percentage points. That, too, of course, falls within the margin of error. So if you look at all of these polls, it's a tie. And you talk to both campaigns, they will tell you it's a tie.
This comes as a new Marist poll has Harris and former President Trump neck and neck in 3 key battleground states.
Yeah, and boy, it's just a little more than a week to go. We're still neck and neck.
Yes, I mean, the latest polling out from New York Times, is we've talked about this morning, has been a 48-48 split on the national vote. Now, that's a trend in favor of President Trump. Last time around, the vice president was +3 in that same polling, but we all know it's probably going to come down to 7 swing states, and nearly every one of them are polling within the margin of errors.
With 2 weeks to go until Election Day, new polling from the Washington Post shows a tight race in every battleground state. Vice President Kamala Harris with the edge in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Former President Trump in Arizona and North Carolina. Each state is within the margin of error.
Nationally, we show Trump up by 2 points, 48% to 46%. Same as our August survey, and both within the 3.1% margin of error.
And I think we're all trying to figure out how much we put in the polls, especially when they're so closer than the margin of error.
Now just 2 points separating these two candidates in this final stretch. Vice President Kamala Harris at 50%. She still has the edge over former President Donald Trump at 48%. This is within the polls' margin of error. But
let's now bring in NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray for a closer look at this new national NBC News poll. It shows that former President Trump and Vice President Harris, they are in a dead heat with just over 3 weeks until Election Day. Take a look at those numbers. Mark, thanks for joining us. Good to have you here. So just a month ago, Harris was leading Trump, but still within the margin of error. But now this is showing this deadlock.
This is the last time we're going to have numbers out of the swing states. It's a literal tie, 49-49. But
3 polls, 1 conclusion. Just 12 days out, the presidential election is dead even, nationally and in every one of the 7 battleground states. CNBC, The Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg all out with polls. Bloomberg describing the race as scrapping for every undecided voter.
The New York Times is out with its final poll before Election Day. It has Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in a dead heat.
Has Harris and Trump deadlocked at 48 to 48%. But pollsters know the 7 swing states will decide this election.
Coast-to-coast campaigning counting down this morning to Election Day. Our new NBC News poll shows the race in a dead heat. Vice President Harris and former President Trump now tied among registered voters nationwide.
David. Our final national poll of this 2024 race. And what does it show in this stable race? A tied race, dead heat among likely voters. 47% Harris, 47% Trump. It obviously doesn't get closer to that.
So I'll spare you any more clips than that, because that should be enough for you to look at and say, wow, they're all using the same exact talking points. Like the stuff I've shown you in the past that you've all seen from the Sinclair Broadcasting Group, how they all receive the same exact script and they all read from the same exact script. You're led to believe that the news are people going to a news station and they're all journalists and they're investigating and they're doing these things. No. They've been trained in psychological operations. So what their job to do is to speak a certain way, to look a certain way, and engineer you into believing the stuff that they're talking about. It's like a hypnotist. They speak that way for a reason. They bring your consciousness down into a delta state. Your brain waves come down and down and down because of the way that they talk. They all talk and act the same. Have you noticed that? Because they're trained the same, like a psychologist, to mind control you, to put you in a form of hypnotism, into thinking what they're talking about is actually real news. It's not. So you can see the talking points there, that they're preparing you for something, right? By telling you that it's dead heat, deadlock. Everybody's looking at it, go, oh boy, they're sucking you in even more and more. Trying to get more and more people to vote, of course, because that's part of the PSYOP, getting you to consent to everything that they're illegally doing to all of us. They need your consent. They need more people to vote. And that's, of course, why they even had to throw in, as you heard in those news clips, they had to throw in the voters who are undecided, the ones who didn't vote, the ones who refuse to actually vote, because there's going to be some blame passed along the lines of the people who refuse to get involved in this PSYOP. Now, you might be saying, okay, so they're telling us that it's going to be close. Does that mean that they're going to tell us that Kamala Harris has won in a landslide? Well, of course, they could take that turn and tell you that this person has won in a landslide. But obviously, if you've been paying attention to the script over the last 8 years, it's going to come down to this little old thing, because that's what this is all about. It's all about these ballots that are being casted anonymously or being casted illegally or being casted via the mail. Now, they're telling us, of course, as of today, and there's your number 33 again, your Freemasonic number that they always use in their PSYOPs, that 33.8 million people have already casted their ballots. And what does that mean? Well, as you're about to see, they're telling you that some states, specific states, as you heard in those talking points, right? Swing states or a few states it's going to come down to. That means that those are the states that it's going to come down to for the psychological operation. They're conditioning you and preparing you to hear stories on the news about how Arizona, they're detesting it. This local little small county could determine the outcome of the election because a box went missing, right? Do those stories sound familiar? Because they've been using them on you for a while now. Oh, some votes came in. We saw the names of dead people on the ballots. What? Oh, some votes came in and we couldn't even pronounce the names. There's no way they were American citizens. In fact, they didn't even leave anything to show us their proof of who they were when they were voting. Like California, they've been gaslighting you with these stories about how you don't have to show proof of ID. It's all being done by design. Why? Because, of course, the digital ID is in play, and this is universal. This isn't a left and right narrative. This is a universal one where both sides could agree on it, right? Because remember during the outbreak in the beginning, both sides were agreeing on, getting a certain something inside your body. Then it became politicalized because they saw that a lot of people who voted conservatively were actually refusing to go and get it. But they wanted you on board with that narrative. That's why Trump continued to brag about it year after year after year. And then they realized, you know what? It's waking too many people up to this. Trump has to stop talking about it. If you notice, he hasn't mentioned it at all during his latest election run here, his latest campaign speeches. He hasn't mentioned it at all by design. But they wanted both sides to be in on that. Well, they certainly want both sides to be in on a digital ID, which is why the alt-right media doesn't push back on technology. You don't hear them talk about a digital ID too often, right? But they're telling you that a PSYOP is coming. In fact, here's some news clips of them in telling you not only that the PSYOP is coming, that you can expect the outcome of this to take days. And I fully expect it to take them days to determine the outcome of this, although it's all predetermined. They're just going to tell you that it's taking days, and then it's going to be more and more disputed because more news stories will come out about, wait a minute, well, where is it being detected? Okay, we're looking at these 2 crucial swing states or these 3 crucial states. And then inside these states, we're looking at these specific counties. And then from there, they'll filter out psychological operations telling you about boxes going missing, names showing up on the ballots of dead people or illegal immigrants who aren't even allowed to vote. And it'll be a seesaw effect. They'll probably tell you out of the gates that Trump has won, but they'll say nothing's official yet. Then they'll say it's looking like Harris has actually won, but nothing's official yet. They're in a dead heat. So now we have to wait and wait and wait while they figure out all these final last ballots, and they build this suspense up in your mind. And you get more and more sucked into the PSYOP, and you think that they're really counting your vote. And then because they really want you to think that your vote actually counts, because that's part of the PSYOP here to prevent a revolution. So they'll continue it and continue it and continue it and continue it and continue it. And then eventually, of course, one side is going to fully dispute it. Here's the media quietly preparing you for that to happen.
Do we know how these people are voting?
Yes, we do. So of the 30 million ballots that have been cast already, the majority, 17 million, have come in by mail. And that includes coming from states that run their elections almost entirely by mail, big states like California, for example. The remaining 13 million have been cast in person at early voting locations around the country. Georgia is a great example of a state where that is the main way people vote these days.
Any battleground states in the former, if we've got a battleground state in person, any battleground states in the mostly by mail? Arizona, right?
Arizona is 80% plus by mail.
The New York Times is out with this new polling this morning showing the race is in a literal dead heat, not plus or minus, but in a dead heat, less than 2 weeks to go. What would you warn voters about what to expect, knowing how tight this may be on election night?
Let's be very clear. If we go back to the 2020 election, nearly 160 million people voted, okay? The likelihood this is going to be called on election night is 0.0. Now, if you're a betting person, like I think Berman is, but if you are a betting person, Sarah, you would take the over. Don't bet on the players in the game, because we don't know. It's such a toss-up. But what we do know, or at least we're led to believe, because of what we know from past history, we know how difficult it is to count all these numbers. It's going to be a few days before we really know who's going to be the next president of the United States.
So it's very clear, because the theme, this isn't a new theme. In fact, when you see them put the wiki blue box underneath the video about voting and you see voting by mail, that's very important. Because they want you to no longer use mail. They're actually doing everything they can to get rid of mail. It's part of the fourth industrial revolution, is removing mail. Everything's going to be digital so that they can have full control. You can't deny anymore saying, I never got something from the IRS in the mail, or I never got this in the mail, or I didn't sign for that. You can't deny anything anymore. In fact, you can't control anything anymore once everything is digital. And it takes a digital ID to do that. And that's the big PSYOP that's going to first come out of this fake election. Talks of the need for a digital ID. Now, will that mean that there'll be a digital ID by the end of 2024? No, I did not say that. But people are going to start asking for it, because it hasn't been a thing where people are begging for a digital ID. We've just heard about, they're releasing digital licenses in certain states like California, and you hear stories about it, and some people are like, yeah, I guess I'll get it. It might be easier, it might not. They monitor that and see how many people willingly go and get a digital ID. Then they tell you, well, you're going to force you into one. And they kind of like, I don't know about that. We hear about senior citizens who don't have phones. And then they go, well, we can't necessarily do it because then we're phasing people out. Let's try to get those senior citizens to get a certain something in their body so they're no longer alive anyway. Then we don't have to worry about easing people into this digital AI governance. But for the time being, there are some of them still here. So they have to get you to consent to all of this stuff. And to get you to consent to the things that they want, they have to start psychological wars on your mind to convince you that this is needed for all of us, for the betterment of us. We need a digital ID so we don't have to worry about any of these people who could be voting illegally. Or on the other side, well, we don't have to worry about Russian interference. Or we don't have to worry about maybe Republicans mailed in a lot of controversial ballots ahead of the election. They were writing their name twice when that was not legal for them. Or, maybe somebody lived in one state, went into another state to vote, and their vote actually counted twice. That's what this is going to come down to. It's literally going to come down to a handful of votes. And don't forget, when it comes down to a handful of votes, the people around you who are conservative are going to blame you or me, because they're going to say, if you just went, right? If you just went and actually voted, because really the people who are refusing to go and vote are this group of us. Not a majority of us, but there's a group of us, and it's a pretty big amount. Because if you look at the numbers they tell you, you can't really believe it, but there's a good amount of us who refuse to vote because we refuse to consent and we refuse to believe this. I would say almost 100% of Democrats vote. Okay? Then you have all the MAGA conservatives who vote. Then there's a group of us who refuse to get sucked into Q, who refuse to get sucked into MAGA, who refuse to consent to any of this stuff. Suddenly, you're going to hear stories about you out there and conspiracy theorists out there who were talking about this leading up to the election. And because people heard people like hurting humanity, suddenly people didn't go and vote. Well, we need to do something about that, because this should be something that's mandated. We should make people go and vote. In fact, and we should censor people out there who do not tell you to go vote, because whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you gotta vote. You gotta play the game. I'm sure you've all run into people who are literally getting on your rear end about you saying you're not gonna vote. I mean, how many Christians out there have seen all the videos, which I'll cover in a separate video, of churches shaming Christians who aren't voting, that Jesus would go vote. Jesus would tell you to vote. You're not a Christian if you don't vote. Do the right thing. God will tell you to do the right thing and vote. I'm sure you've all heard it. It's your job. It's your obligation as a Christian to go and vote. And of course, they're only saying that because they're repeating what they hear. Just like I showed you, the repetition of all the stuff about how tight the election is, right? Repetition's the key to mind control. They tell a friend and they tell a friend, and it repeats itself. It repeats itself. It repeats itself. So all of these people who used to probably not care if you voted or not are going to care. They're going to make sure they let you know, because they've been conditioned as well to shame you for not actually going and voting. There is a big PSYOP coming, folks. There's a dead heat a deadlock. The margin of error is really, really thin. I mean, in fact, the margin of error is so close that we can't give you an actual outcome yet because it's going to be that tight. In fact, what we're hearing right now with weeks ago is that it's a tie. Oh boy, well, if it's a tie, what ends up happening? Well, it's going to come down to that last vote. And what a better way for this thing to play out, right? If you were going to script it, than to have it come down to a few actual votes. And to shame people out there who refuse to vote, especially some of the conservative people out there who will be very upset at their fellow Christians who don't go and vote. This is nothing more than a psychological Operation 101 experiment that you're watching. They are manufacturing you. They're talking about polls. They're conditioning you into thinking that this was tight. Would you know that this was tight if it wasn't for the news? Of course not. You'd have no idea. You'd be using your own eyes. And I think if most people use their own eyes, they would say there's 0% chance that Kamala Harris would ever even win, let alone be neck and neck or have a chance to possibly win. There's just no way she would possibly win. Because if you use your own eyes, you would look around and people are not okay with what the government is doing. Nobody's really okay. It's a small majority of people who are on board because they don't have a clue about what the government's trying to implement here with global communism. But if it wasn't for the news, you wouldn't even think it was a tight race. You wouldn't even know what to think. They're the ones who are manufacturing this into you. Just kind of like a few years ago. If the TV didn't tell you over and over and over and over again that there was an outbreak, you would have never known it was going on. You wouldn't have seen people lying in the stores on the floor with hives on them, dying, dropping dead the way that they were telling you. You wouldn't have seen overpopulation or overcrowdedness in hospitals because it wasn't happening. In fact, I often talk back then about memes. The Amish had no idea what was going on until the point where they weren't getting things imported that they needed or be able to sell things that they usually would sell because people weren't showing up to buy it. But before that, they had no idea there was even an outbreak because they didn't own a television. They weren't on the internet. The news formulates your perception of the world. They need you tuned in because if you tune out, the game's over for them. And what matters just as much as tuning in is engaging, emotionally engaging, investing, thinking that this is all really going on, when everybody with common sense should know that Trump and Harris are friends, that the Dems and the Republicans are buddy-buddy. They're all with one another in a giant bed known as secret societies. They have all committed treason. They've all taken an oath to one another and to the coming global communism tyranny. And they're all going to have a place in this tyrannical global government, whether they announce it to you or not. Who's here and who's there? They're all going to be in the shadows pulling the strings of the civilians because they're already doing it. And now they just want to make sure that you know before the election, it's close. It's real close. In fact, make sure the day after the election, the next day you're watching the news. I mean, they're going to tell us about how many people are tuned in, and they will be tuned in. They'll be tuned in because they're in the hive mind. They're going to believe what they hear. They're going to have their emotions pulled one way versus the other. You're going to see all these memes out there of people reacting when they finally tell us. But I guarantee you there will be days of back and forth. Ooh, wait. Harris won? No, now we're hearing from this source that Trump has won. It's too close to call. We're really going to need to get down to the nitty gritty. And then, of course, the nitty gritty will be a scripted PSYOP that they have planned for you. Whatever county they've already pre-picked from this specific state, they're going to go in there. They're going to tell you exactly what the story is and maybe how it could come down to an actual one box of votes that came in through the mail that nobody can verify if these are United States citizens or not, or if they're people that voted multiple times. We don't know because of the fact that our government's even told us to not even show ID to vote anymore. All done by design to hook you, hook, line, and sinker. And of course, to bring about that digital ID of enslavement. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.